Police officers in Peru used tear gas to evict several families established on a land parcel in the Lomo de Corvina sector. India's COVID-19 death toll surpassed 3,600 on Thursday, marking a new grim record for the Asian nation. Unidentified attackers fired rockets at two Myanmar air bases, causing minor damage and no casualties. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. On Wednesday, Peruvian police officers used tear gas to evict several families established since April 11th on a land parcel on the Lomo de Corvina sector in the department of Lima. The occupants had set up tents and named the site Grupo de Familia Luis Barbarán in Lomo de Corvina, a piece of land owned by the Peruvian government and the Lauren Mining Company. According to police reports, 2,700 officers violently repressed and dispersed the families and used tear gas during the raid. The occupants are poor families who were left unemployed and without economic aid during the pandemic, who built the settlements after losing their homes because they are unable to pay rent. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, forced eviction is defined as the removal of individuals, families, or communities from the homes or land they occupy, permanently or temporarily, without providing them with appropriate legal or other means of protection or access to them. Ecuador's Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of the decriminalization of abortion for victims of rape. With 7 votes in favor and 2 against, the court ruled in favor of a lawsuit filed in July 2019 by women's rights organizations arguing that Articles 149 as well as 150 of the Criminal Code should be declared unconstitutional. The articles, which will now be abolished, establish that abortion in Ecuador is illegal except when performed in the case of a threat to the life of a pregnant woman or when the pregnancy is the result of the rape of a mentally disabled woman. The decision marks a historic victory for movements defending women's sexual and reproductive rights and challenging increasing gender violence in Ecuador. In Colombia, people took to the streets of the capital, Bogotá, on Wednesday as part of the national strike action calling rejection of the tax reform presented by the government of Iván Duque. The controversial reform includes an increase in value-added tax, the establishment of urban road tolls, and the elimination of deductions and subsidies. The proposed reform has met stiff resistance in Congress, including from a coalition from parties that supports President Iván Duque's government. Opponents stress the changes will unnecessarily burden taxpayers who are already stretched by the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Trade unions mobilized to protest the reform, as well as other government policies, demanding that the legislature analyze the proposal, which they argue violates the rights of Colombians and favors corruption and tax evasion. And Colombia's notorious anti-riot squad mobilized to disperse demonstrators in the capital. The repressive acts left at least 1 person injured as the squad launched tear gas at those rallying. Since the early hours of the morning, citizens have taken to the streets of Bogotá as part of the national strike action called by the National Strike Committee for Life, Peace, Democracy and against the president's proposed tax reform. On Tuesday, a Bogotá court granted the request of far-right President Iván Duque to suspend permissions for anti-government protests on Wednesday and Labor Day celebrations on May 1st. However, the strike organizers stressed they will maintain the mobilization. In the United States, a judge has ruled that body camera footage showing the moments when African-American Andrew Brown Jr. was shot and killed by police will not be released on the public at this time. The judge said he will reconsider a public release in the next 30 to 45 days, and some of the footage can be disclosed to certain members of Brown's family, but for now it will not be released to the public to protect an active internal and criminal investigation or potential internal criminal investigation. Andrew Brown Jr. was shot 5 times by police, including in the back of the neck, as he tried to drive away from several police officers in what his family described as an execution, demanding that all body camera video be released. The FBI has opened a federal civil rights investigation into Brown's death, while officials in Elizabeth City, whose population is nearly 20,000, declared a state of emergency and ordered a curfew in anticipation of possible protest over the latest killing of an African American at the hands of police. President Joe Biden made his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday night. He pressed his agenda, which includes a $2 trillion plan and a newly unveiled $1.8 trillion plan for families, children, and students. During his speech, Biden claimed to be looking to sustain economic growth following the passage of his massive COVID relief and stimulus plan as the country recovers from the pandemic. He is also pushing for mass vaccinations against COVID-19 as demand slips slightly and cases come down. The president has also made the case for a board green energy initiative as part of his infrastructure and jobs plan in a bid to restructure the economy for years to come. He also briefly called on Congress to pass legislation that will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And in his first address to Congress this Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden spoke in behalf of international cooperation. And among the subjects, he stated that the people of the United States has to be united to rebuild trust in law and to root out racism of the justice system.
Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death.
And the U.S. President Joe Biden called for higher taxes on wealthy Americans and corporations as he seeks ways to pay for his massive spending proposals aimed at improving infrastructure and increasing employment.
Let's start with what I will not do. I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. India's COVID-19 death toll surpassed 300,600 on Thursday, marking a new grim record for the Asian nation. As of late April, India has reported for over 2,000 fatalities of the 3.1 million lives lost because of the pandemic. In many Indian cities, hospitals' bed occupancy rate is too high to cope with new admissions of COVID-19 patients, and also healthcare institutions face scarcity of oxygen and medical supplies. The Indian government will open vaccination facilities to all adults from Saturday in an effort to halt infections. Authorities had previously limited shots to those over 45 and certain other groups. Several states have warned, however, that they do not have sufficient vaccine stocks, and the expanded rollout is threatened by administrative bickering, confusion over prices, and technical glitches on the government's digital vaccine platform. And as an attempt to alleviate India's severe health situation, Russia sent emergency humanitarian aid. The aircraft landed in the Indira Gandhi International Airport, carrying over 22 tons of medical materials, including 20 pieces of equipment for oxygen support, 75 artificial lung ventilation devices, 150 medical monitors, and 200,000 packages of drugs for treatments against COVID-19. In Uruguay, health authorities confirmed the presence of the Brazilian variant P1 of the COVID-19. After analyzing 493 samples, representatives of the Ministry of Public Health and other institutions that are part of the monitoring group explained that the 89% of the presence of the Brazilian variant P1 was detected. The executive indicated that this strain mainly affects the youngest. To date, Uruguay's national emergency system has reported 2,939 new infections and 46 deaths. The government of Argentina announced that it's holding negotiations with Cuban authorities to produce Soberana 2 vaccine developed in the Caribbean island. This Wednesday, the Argentine presidential advisor Cecilia Nicolini stated that the national government is working on the possibility of advancing with clinical trials for the production of the vaccine. Nicolini recalled that Argentine head of state Alberto Fernandez and Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel have been holding talks since early April to discuss the acquisition of the Cuban drug, which is in phase 3 and is the third vaccine against COVID-19 to be produced in the country after the agreements signed with AstraZeneca and Sputnik V developers. In Argentina, a total of 62,947 people have died from this disease, while the number of positive cases nears 3 million. At a bilateral meeting in Moscow, the foreign ministers of Russia and Mexico and representatives of the Russian Direct Investment Fund announced the start of production and packaging of the Sputnik V vaccine in Mexico. Foreign ministers Sergei Lavrov and Marcelo Ebrard confirmed that Mexico began bottling and packaging the vaccine from May. The two officials also discussed the arrival of 12 million doses of Sputnik V instead of the 24 million previously agreed after the development of the new vaccine format, which only requires a single dose. The visit by the Mexican foreign minister, which concludes on Thursday, includes discussions on the diversification of relations in the economic, commercial, and investment spheres. Mexican teachers are being vaccinated against COVID-19 with China's CanSino vaccine as the country sees a fall in infections. Mexico's official COVID-19 death toll of around 215,000 is the third highest in the world, after those of the United States and Brazil.
Used to technology because I was used to work with my kids, the chalk and the blackboard, and running around with them. Maybe we will not be able to have a life like before, but the vaccine brings us some peace of mind so we can work safely. I had a hard time getting used to technology because I was used to work with my kids, the chalk and the blackboard, and running around with them. Maybe we will not be able to have a life like before, but the vaccine brings us some peace of mind so we can work safely.
The director of the Pan American Health Organization has urged countries with extra doses of COVID-19 vaccines to donate them to Latin American nations, which are suffering from a surge in cases and limited vaccine supplies.
Has demonstrated that it can successfully distribute COVID vaccines quickly and effectively. Yet, supplies are still far behind what is this region's urgent need for more doses. And that's why we want again to urge countries with extra doses to consider donating a significant portion of these to the Americas, where these life-saving doses are desperately needed and will be promptly used.
The Assistant Director of the Pan American Health Organization explains that the interruption of the supply of the AstraZeneca vaccine from India will affect not only the target countries for those doses, but the whole region.
Impact, because we have 3 countries in the region that receive AstraZeneca vaccine from India, which are Bolivia, Haiti, and Nicaragua. But with the interruption in India, which so far has not resulted in a decision to reship vaccines, all other countries may also suffer a significant reduction in vaccine supply because AstraZeneca vaccines from other producers will be shared by all.
And people in the Watuma Sustainable Development Reserve in the Brazilian Amazon are being vaccinated against COVID-19 with the support of a private NGO, the Sustainable Amazon Foundation. Instead of vaccinating by age or race groups, as in other parts of the country, the pilot project will vaccinate 100% of eligible people in all communities in the reserve. Brazilian authorities have faced criticism for their failure to protect vulnerable indigenous communities in the Amazon from the coronavirus.
In these remote locations, so our recommendation is a vaccination of 100% of the vaccinable members of the community. Not everyone is eligible, but all those eligible can do it at once. And with that, the arrival of the vaccine in these areas becomes viable.
The feeling we have today is of total gratitude to God and science.
And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday said that the pandemic poses a threat to press freedom. Guterres was addressing an online discussion in the lead-up to World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd.
Last year have reminded us that access to reliable information is more than just a basic human right. It can also be a matter of life and death. The COVID-19 pandemic has been accompanied by an enormous concurrent infodemic. Misinformation and hate speech have proliferated, jeopardizing the health of millions of people worldwide, undermining confidence in vaccines and science, and dividing communities and countries. The pandemic has had another very dangerous side effect. It has accelerated the financial decline of many public interest media organizations.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back from the south. On Thursday, unidentified attackers fired rockets at 2 Myanmar air bases, causing minor damage and no casualties, according to the military. 4 rockets were fired at an airbase near the central town of Magwai. In the early hours, one of them fell on the road and the 3 others hit nearby farms. Later, 5 rockets were fired at one of the country's main air bases at Maykila, which is also in central Myanmar, from a farm to the north of the base, but there was no damage or any casualties. There have been no claims of responsibility for these attacks. According to local media, security checks were stepped up on the roads outside the base after the blast. Since the February 1st ousting of the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi, pro-democracy protesters have taken to the streets and faced violent crackdowns by the military, which had launched numerous airstrikes in borderlands in the north and the east. In Syria, the Supreme Constitutional Court received the ballot box containing the votes of the country's parliament members for the candidates of the upcoming presidential elections on Thursday. The chief of the Supreme Constitutional Court stated that following the reception of the box, the court will examine all the applications and decide within a legal period of 5 days. Also, he said the court will issue its decision of the first announcement within the legal period, with a number of candidates whose examinations and nominations were accepted and the others who were rejected. The total number of the submitted applications has reached at 51 candidates, including 7 women. On Thursday, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that talks between Greek and Cypriot leaders have failed to find common ground in resolving the decades-old division of Cyprus. The talks were attended by the Greek Cypriot leader Nikos Anastasiades, the Turkish Cypriot leader Ersin Tatar, and the foreign ministers of Greece, Turkey and Britain, plus the UN. The Secretary Antonio Guterres traveled to Geneva to oversee the 3 days of informal talks, but so far the leaders have not overcome their differences. The UN is trying to mediate a deal for the Eastern Mediterranean island after nearly 6 decades since it first deployed peacekeepers. Cyprus has been mired in a decades-long struggle between the Greek and Turkish Cypriots, despite a series of diplomatic efforts by the UN to achieve a comprehensive settlement.
My agenda is very simple. My agenda is strictly to fight for the security and well-being of the Cypriots, of the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots. We have been able to agree that I will convene in the near future another meeting of the 5+1, the 5 plus the United Nations, again with the objective to move in the direction of reaching common ground to allow for formal negotiations to start.
We now go to South Africa, where People International Film Festival is being held in Cape Town. The film festival champions content creators from around the world regardless their language, origin, orientation, race or religion. It aims to create an intimate and collaborative space for filmmakers. Our collaborator Stephen Taylor brings us more details.
The National Film Festival is taking place in Cape Town from the 27th of April to the 1st of May. The 27th of April happens to be South Africa's Freedom Day, an important day in South Africa's history. The city of Cape Town, who are on board as partners of the festival, was represented by the MACO member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, on the festival.
Movies tell people about morality, about hope, about principles, about different places in the world. It shows a whole of opportunity and ideas that people are exposed to only through that format. It's not going to get it to people through books, sadly. So you are an incredibly important informer of our morality, our collective morality, and our vision and our hope as a nation. For us, the obvious reason for us promoting it is economic development.
Hollywood actor Hakeem K. Kazim decided to come on board as the festival director. This is what he had to say about his involvement in the One People International Film Festival.
The idea was to bring a festival together that would celebrate the film industry and try and give it some sort of oomph. So we're going to be taking place, as you know, in Cape Town this year. And the idea also was that Cape Town itself has been devastated by the coronavirus. The idea of the tourist industry has been completely devastated. So how do we marry these two things? Well, the idea was to bring a One People's International Film Festival.
The One People International Film Festival taking place in Cape Town from the 27th of April to the 1st of May. Both in person at New Metro Canal Walk in Cape Town as well as online via Quicket. You can watch the movies online via Quicket. Movies like Another Round, which just won an Oscar award for the best foreign film, and also the Khoi Khoi Saga, which is a story about the indigenous people of Cape Town. For TeleSUR News in Cape Town, I'm Stephen Taylor.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.